You all might know somebody who is in a wheelchair, but annually, worldwide, there are almost 400,000 new spinal injuries every year. And what's more, if you look at the average age of these people, they typically can survive with their injury for 30, 40 years. So the costs over the lifetime of these patients are staggering above €2 million or $2 million per patient. So also from a healthcare management or economics perspective, these are very costly. If you compare it to more acute diseases like oncology or cardiovascular diseases, these costs are much higher because of the chronicity. And we were discussed earlier, most people just see the wheelchair, and there are nice movies about people in a wheelchair, but I always show this, what I call the paralysis iceberg. The wheelchair is what you see, but what you don't see is that these people really have a lot of other problems. Typically it takes them, for example, it takes them 2 hours every morning to get out of bed, to get dressed and washed. But also blood pressure problems. If they stand up too fast, they'll faint, or if they sit up fast. They have bladder problems, bowel problems, sexual function. They are dependent on others, so the dependency on their caregivers is huge. Of course, there are limitations in jobs, activities they can do with the children, etc. But also sleep problems, pressure ulcers, etc. So there's a huge plethora of activities. We focus initially on the ability to walk again, but if you walk again, you get out of your wheelchair, and a lot of these problems also reduce, because your bowels get more activated, your cardiovascular function is improved, you get less pressure ulcers, also you sleep better, etc. So we measure all these parameters, but it's not the primary objective. So GTX Medical, we exist now for a little more over 3 years. It's a spin out of a research group at EPFL, at the Technical University of Lausanne in Switzerland. There, Professor Bottini has been working for already 10, 15 years to understand the mechanisms of spinal injury and how you can treat those. In the meantime, we now, this is old, we're now 55 people, most of them in Eindhoven, and still a couple of them in Switzerland, focusing on the clinical and regulatory. The reason why, 3 years ago they asked me to become the CEO, and I moved the company to the Netherlands for a number of reasons. One is the cost of living is more than a factor 2 cheaper here than there, so I can hire 2 engineers for the price of less than 1 in Switzerland. Also, there are some very good investors in the Netherlands, which actually I also used in my previous company. And also I knew quite a lot, my network of good people was also quite good. It's essential if you develop an active implant or medical device to have good people in the neighborhood. And we're still recruiting from, I would say, even outside Europe to get good people. So we had already a strong licensing position, IP position that's been still growing. And I'm very glad that we really had a very strong investor support. We raised almost €40 million 3 years ago to get this going. And although Professor Bottini, which is really a friend of mine now, he has this lifelong vision of treating everybody. As a CEO, you really have to focus on the next 5 years and make your first product into a success. So the most difficult thing is to decide the things you do not do, because it's so easy to try to boil the ocean, and it's a constant struggle against also a lot of enthusiastic researchers, scientists. Yeah, but we should have this and we should have. No, we should have this minimally viable product out as soon as possible, because that's where you get the chance to prove that it's good. And that's one of the struggles we continuously have, because continuously things pop up and people say, this is also useful, and then it's difficult to keep that track. And so if you look at how this life looks right now, if you get a spinal injury, basically you're told to live with your handicap. And that is, you get an accident, traffic, falls, bleeding, ski accident, and then you get some care to make sure that your trauma is being taken care of, and then you basically learn to deal with your handicap, to get out from your bed in your wheelchair, from your wheelchair in your car, and back, and that's it. And I have spoken to many rehab doctors who typically develop a lifelong relation with their patients to treat all these symptoms and all these other problems they have, but they are never focused on seeing how they can improve their condition. Yeah? So the condition is a given, and yeah, we have to make the best of it. So for us, the challenge is now also to change the mindset of these rehabilitation clinicians who have a very strong relation to protect their patients, to develop, to work together to see how we can actually move this mindset into seeing how far we can get by improving those patients. That's an interesting challenge. So, live with disability. So, what we try to do is, after the accident, implant a lead, and you see it here, here's a 60 electrode lead, implant at the lower part of the spine, and not where the lesion is, the lesion can be anywhere, but we stimulate at the position of the part of the spinal cord that is responsible for locomotion. You might know the spinal cord is part of your central nervous system. So the intelligence for walking is not in your head, it's in your spinal cord. So, and by simply because there is a lesion, there is no connection any longer between your brain and that part of the spinal cord that's responsible for walking. So that circuitry, those circuitries become dormant. And by actively stimulating them, you reactivate them. And then that's the next thing, what Courtine discovered. If you then stimulate regularly and you train very intensely, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, 5 months, then some mysterious ways, these fibers that are stopped in the lesion are creating new, they're sprouting, they form new lesions, new axons. They make functional connections again, and you can get a real, conscious control over your walking again. Of course, what we tried now with a couple of patients is we only tried patients that had injuries after 5 to 7 years, which means that there's a lot of atrophiation of muscles and of nerves. So that mechanism of recovery is not perfect. We think that if you start much earlier, so patients that have an injury just weeks after the injury get implanted, then the success will be much better. But that's for future. So the trying is to get to unsupervised use at home as a prosthetic device. Just to show you a bit about Courtine's work, he did a lot on rodents, and I'll show you now going to show a movie about of one of his rats, famous rat. This rat was on the front page of the New York Times in 2011, I think, where he showed that they could get them walking again. The first part of the movie is the first part, that if you stimulate at the right place, you can get these muscles to step again. So you can make him, let's say, involuntary move again. The next step is indeed this training effect where you get this regrowth. So here you see the muscle, this is the second phase where you see he starts walking voluntarily again. Oh, and I have to stop this because I see that I quit. And on the treadmill, and now we have stimulating, and the moment the bell start to go, he starts to step. And this is then 5 years later, where we've done all this training, 3 months, and now the mouse the rat can voluntarily move towards the switched up chocolate. And this is then the illustration that you get this regrowth in the lesion, but also in the motor cortex of the brain. We show this in a simple movie. Basically, we have sensors in the shoes, and those sensors basically detect where the legs are. So when the leg hits the ground, so that we can synchronize the stimulation in the walking pattern. Now we have a controller that wires and receives these data from these foot sensors, and this controller then translates and calculates this into stimulation patterns, and that stimulation pattern, depending on where you are in the gait cycle, is then communicated to an implantable pulse generator that's positioned a kind of pacemaker that is, and basically we have figured out which muscle to stimulate at which moment in the gait cycle. So it does the name, soleus, etc. And the pulse generator receives these instructions and then goes to the lead, and the lead then sends the electrical pulses to the right electrodes. And then if you then do this while walking, then you get different stimulation patterns at different moments. That's how it works. So that means that you have several parts of the unit. So how does this therapy look like? And I emphasize, so this is not a technology company, but we're developing a therapy, meaning that yes, you have to develop the technology, but also you have to convince neurosurgeons and rehab doctors that they should start using this. So we have very close collaboration with physiotherapists and others. So first is patient selection. You have to be very careful. People have to be motivated to spend 5 months of their life doing not much more than just training and exercising and doing this. And expectation management is really crucial. We had actually one person who expected that he would be, as if he were not to have an accident. Well, that's the wrong expectation. And we're not doing miracles. You still have your handicap, but we try to improve your rehab. That's one of the learnings. So then we do this neurosimulation. Then we implant the lesion, implantation of the lead and the pulse generator. Then we have a kind of mapping phase where basically we're going to test putting a simulation of each electrode and then see which muscles react and make a kind of matrix of which electrodes correspond to which muscles and the right timing, etc., and right amplitudes. And then we started rehab training. We work together with another company called Motec, where we have developed a three-dimensional overground bodyweight support system. Basically some rails with a harness that the patient hangs in, and then we can take over, let's say, 30 or 50% of his body weight, so we can start practicing without having the full weight to bear. And such a system, we developed that together, but Motec is now selling this. We just got the e-mark of it, and they are installing it now at a number of sites. And then gradually during this rehabilitation phase, we work towards, also working without this body weight support, so that gradually they also then can start using it at home, or what we call in regulatory terms unsupervised use, which is regulatory-wise something completely different, because here the responsibility is with the physiotherapist or the doctor that he's doing, and here we have to educate the patient or they have to demonstrate that the product is safe enough for him to be used on his own. Okay, so how does this look like in practice? And there, of course, I'm very proud that I can show you that it's not only PowerPoint presentations, but that we actually are making things. So from top to bottom, you there see an animation of the heart of our system, which is an implantable neurostimulator or impulsive pulse generator. And you might say, well, this is a pacemaker very similar to other ones. Yes, but this is the worldwide first pacemaker that is designed for locomotion, meaning that because we have a closed loop system that detects where your feet are, then very quick, very fast, give that information to the controller, give it to here, and then to the pulses. That whole cycle takes less than 20 milliseconds. And since there is no other application of a, let's say, motion-related simulator, we are the first that really have focused on this very short latency time. Also, we had a discussion before, different muscles require different frequencies to stimulate. A flexor muscle typically gets activated at about 30 Hertz. An extensor, a flexor muscle, it requires 80 to 100 Hertz. And if you walk, you simultaneously stretching this leg and bending this leg, so you have kind of complex, let's say, orchestrating of different muscles at different frequencies. So you need the pulse generator, and we have now designed one which has 16 independent current sources, where also the frequencies are independent, so really something that you can program as well. So that's our IPG. There's also some proprietary communication that we are using. We have NXP nearby. NXP developed a chipset for communication through your ears, to be able to have hearing aids, be able to hear different distances. Whether the sound comes from left or right, you have to have an active relation between left and right. So they have a chipset that was able to communicate to 20 centimeters of bones and tissue. Well, that's what we are now using. And it's nice to have those people on campus to just, if you want to use it, that they can give you information out there. And then, of course, the second one is the pedal lead, the 16 electrode lead that we implant epidurally in the spinal cord, so outside the dura. And the unique things here, it's very flexible. It also is very wide and long, because we have to cover quite a long range of electrodes. If you want to see them, please look and don't ruin it. And here's and then, apart from these two implantable parts, we have this motion controller that patients wear here on their belly. It makes sure that there is good communication with the IPG, because we need real-time communication during the hours that he's walking. It also takes care of charging the rechargeable battery in there and things like that. And that communicates with commercially available motion sensors that you can put on your shoes. And then we also have a programmer, a clinician programmer, a kind of tablet where a physician can program the details of the simulation, and a kind of smart watch where a patient can select different activities. For example, if you want to stand up from sit to stand, and you need to activate to extend both your legs at the same time, which is a different movement than standing. So that's why we program different type of actions, and what he can do is just select the right one, start, and then 3, 2, 1, get started. And there are no patients here. Last month I presented to the DOM, the Dwarslezenorganisatie Nederland, so the Dutch paralysis organization. I was in front of 120 people in a wheelchair, which is quite confronting, I can tell you. But they were very much afraid. Wow, I mean, I had an accident to my spine. I'm reluctant for another surgery on my spine. Well, the good news is that the technology we use is already used hundreds of thousands of times for people who have chronic pain. So it's in principle, the principles we use is the same for spinal stimulation for pain. Only our lead is a bit larger, a bit wider, and the IPG has some different electronic characteristics. But you know, regarding biosafety and biostability, etc., that's all the same. Okay, so now I have to explain something else. So we are still in product development of our system. However, you already saw some patients. Well, normally if you do product development of medical device, you first do product development, then you get all the regulatory approvals, and then you can start a clinical study. Fortunately, Corteam had started a research collaboration with another company to get access to their pulse generator, and they have started a collaboration. And that IPG was not really suitable, and it didn't have all these modes, and it didn't have all these frequencies, but still it was useful to do a feasibility study. And so just after we finished the financing round of the company, they could start their clinical study. And that's now why I can report now on the first 3 patients of that study. And that's very useful for us, because now while we're developing, we're getting real live data of patients, so we can test a number of things, and we can get feedback, and we can still adjust the specifications or the requirements a bit based on the testing. So this study is called STIMO. If you're interested, Grégoire published in October 31st, he published the results in Nature. Actually, that was here, and that got so much attention that even it was on the BBC World News. I'll show you this, a 30-second clipping.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. A man who was told he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair has walked again thanks to extraordinary work by scientists in Switzerland. The 30-year-old, who was left paralysed after a martial arts accident, has had an implant attached to his spine which boosts the signals from his brain to his legs. And incredibly, some of the damaged nerves have regrown.
This is David training with his implant a year ago. Stim on means it's turned on. When it's turned off, he can't move. Back on, and he continues to walk.
Yeah, so we were very proud. Actually, one of our colleagues was in Argentina, in Friesland, in the very south, and was even there when he was in a cafe. He saw him slipping on this. So this study, 8 patients. A lot of limitations, so existing system, long latency, no frequency, etc. The late was not good enough. Only had chronic patients, 7 or 8 years, 5 to 7 years after the lesion, but still we had astonishing results. And so this one of the patients, this was the patient before. He had 50% body weight support, so he could not stand or walk on his own. This was prior to implantation. And after 5 months training, he was actually now able, to start this manually. Yeah, he was able to walk the staircase without stimulation. So this is actually already some proof that really there has to be some neuroplasticity and able to step down. So you can imagine how much impact this has on the quality of life of such a patient who now can move through his apartment on his own instead of asking him to be moved or getting out of the bed, etc. This is patient number 2, and this is before the implantation. And you have to look at his left leg. His left leg is completely paralyzed, so he basically drags his leg and he walks with his hands and then lets his left leg fall. and basically he blocks it, and then he can rest on it, and then gets walk. So, and here you see that he's, what I have to say about this move, this is for me the most important one. What you see, we ask him to walk here, we stimulate, and then halfway we ask him, can you lift your leg, left leg, which is completely paralyzed, can you lift it higher? We don't change stimulation settings, we just ask him what he can do to exaggerate the movements. And then let's show what happens. So here's he stepping with 30% body weight support. And now, without any different, he now can just move his left leg up. So what you can see here, basically, he really can regain control over his muscles, voluntary control, which is, I think, remarkable. And oh yeah, here is the. So if you look at this, is before the. So you see this. This is the scoring of the motor score of his leg. So you see that all the main muscles have motor score 0. And then this, after 2 months, he said, I slept very badly because I could. I noticed I could move my leg a little bit. And then we continued the training, and after 5 months, he was able, without stimulation, to lift his completely paralyzed leg again against gravity completely. And well, you can imagine that for him was also very exciting that things are changing in his body again. Also his hip flexion, so he can also move his hip again. Also actually wriggling his toe, which is the more distal part of his leg. And also, people don't know, but they don't sweat anymore, because the sweating is prohibited, and also the sweating has returned. Meaning that also some actually really some autonomous functions are recovering. And this is 5 months after we finished with the training. And this was actually him showing off after a couple of months of training to one of his physiotherapists. And he didn't know, by the way, that actually there was no stimulation on. And he was showing him that he could, really walk without any support, only some lateral bars.
Wow.
Six steps?
Without stimulation. So this was, I think, for him a great accomplishment. So in summary, so what are we going to do? Of course, we're going to finalize our neurostimulation system and to get it ready for also our clinical studies. We're going to finish this ongoing first-in-man study. Actually, we've extended this first study with 2 additional patients because you saw that our lead actually is already completely finished. So we're going to do the last 2 patients actually with our own lead to already test to see whether that is already giving an improvement. Then mid next year, we're going to do a second study, feasibility study, still with the system of the other company, focusing on acute patients. And there we're going to also use 3 different sites. One site in the Netherlands, we're going to use Nijmegen, the Martens Clinic, where we're going to do another 10 to 20 patients, but then within 2 to 4 weeks after a spinal cord injury, to see whether we can really get a much stronger effect if we can do this immediately after injury. And then of course we have to do a multi-center study to really do a proper validation of our own system to get CE mark, and then we also go to the US. And as I said in the beginning, since we're developing new therapy, this introduction, the therapy introduction towards the specialists is crucial. So we have a lot of interactions with neurosurgeons and neurorehabilitation specialists and these kind of specialized centers and physiotherapists to make sure that also these specialists, these experts are willing to use our system. And all with this, you saw this already some movie, but I think this also, summarizes it nicely, that we want to really improve the quality of life of these patients again. This is in Lake Geneva, which of course also a nice environment, it shows the capacity. What's interesting is to watch on this video, by the way, so he's now stepping with stimulation on, and his wheelchair is around the corner, and then you can see that he can now, while the stimulation continues, he can just stop, turn, and sit before he turns off the stimulation. So it shows that he can really, with his mind, can overrule the stimulation patterns, and it's really, that he can control this with his brain. See, he sits, he stands still, and now he can sit, and now it's ready. Okay, thank you for your attention.